Sawadee krap. I have to apologize to all of you because my Thai is extremely bad, so I will have to do this presentation in English. In case you cannot understand my very strong French accent, please raise your hand, and Kulnisit may be able to help a little bit. Hopefully he can understand me fully.
I hope.
So I have a very difficult task today. I was asked to make a presentation on smart grids and how it is enabling the grid of the future. For those of you, and I think all of you who have been in the industry for many years, you know that smart grid is a word which is used since, 20, maybe 30 years, and which encompasses, aggregates so many things. So what I have done, I have selected a few technologies, first on the asset side, and second on what I see as digital transformation technologies that will already have started actually make the grid of the future smarter. As much as a grid can be smart, because I still think that only human beings can be smart indeed. So I will start, and this is very much applicable to Thailand, and it applies to many countries with different stages, to how the grid is evolving, just very shortly. So, as you know, many years ago, the grid was very simple. And this is how it had been developing for 100 years since the grid started. You had centralized power generation, consumers, and everything was like in a pyramid. All the technologies had been developed to have higher and higher voltage, higher and higher capacities on the grid, on the lines, stronger protection equipment, control, to have a safe grid. However, things have been changing. In most of the countries, you had renewables about more pressure about putting renewables. Having right-of-ways to develop transmission lines has become very difficult. Nobody wants to have a coal-fired power plant in its backyard. So all of this, with the prices going down of renewables, has completely shifted in many places the way the grid is currently being designed. And I am one of the persons who are convinced that this is only going to accelerate in the future. We will always have some large power plants. These will not disappear. But step by step, their importance will reduce. And with the cost of renewables going down, with investments being really fragmented, decentralized, we will see a grid in all the countries which will be completely shifted. Just look at the growth of renewables globally. 27% in some countries, like in some areas like Europe, is coming out of renewables. Maybe in America, Mr. Trump has put a little bit of hold on this for a few years, but I am sure that when Mr. Trump is gone, because he will not be there forever unless he becomes president for life, renewables will start again to develop very strongly. And there is no exception. In Thailand, I think you started very, very early with a very strong government support on feed-in tariffs, about 15, maybe 20 years ago. And you have a very high penetration of renewables, which causes a challenge in itself. You see that there are new regulations. Countries are signing some obligations for themselves to meet COP21 standards for our children, so that we ensure a brighter and safer, greener future for our children. So there is a pressure from society as well to go in this direction. And there are some very new business models. If you look in some countries, there are some companies which are starting to develop electrical cars with free charging. And this is basically posing a threat also to some utilities companies, distributors, retailers, but also some new business models for those companies who can embrace the change and develop through new technologies what society wants and how things are evolving. So this is how, it's just an image how the grid looks like today. You still have some large power plants, but you have decentralized energy resources which are spread across the grid. And on top of this, you have the typical customers, whether they are private customers, some people in their home are putting home solar, but also private companies who are becoming generators, the famous prosumers that you find in most of the countries. The difficulty and the challenge is that most of these decentralized energy sources are intermittent, whether it is solar, small wind farms. It is intermittent and it is causing havoc in this grid that I was mentioning at the beginning, which was a pyramid hierarchical grid, which was maybe not always easy but relatively standard to design, and which the utilities had full control of. And what does this require? This requires to have real-time operational data down, maybe not to all levels, but down also sometimes behind the meter of what prosumers, consumers are consuming and producing to ensure the stability of the grid. So this is just a picture taken, in some area, just to show in 25 years. 25 years is nothing in the time scale of a utility, and this has accelerated of how generation was being spread. You see from about 10 centers of generation, and consumer points haven't changed much, it has gone to more than 500 points of generation, just to illustrate how complex the grid has become. And with these facilities which are spread everywhere, forecasting and having this ability on real time with strong processing power to assess what the grid is, how the grid is behaving, and to ensure its stability is a real challenge. So there is one technology in which there is a lot of, I think, buzz and discussions happening, including in Thailand. The first technology which is making this possible is battery energy storage. I will talk a little bit more about battery energy storage and the difference with microgrid later. But you have seen, and this was some people who had a strong vision a few years back forecasted, like for solar PV, it was forecasted that the price of batteries with the economies of scale, just like you have for LCD TVs and so on, would go down dramatically. And it is now reaching a point where quite a number of projects become viable financially. And this is really for all the smart grid technology in the end, the key point. Are the technologies that we are bringing to the market, to you as customers, or regulators, as developers, does it make sense to invest into these technologies? And battery energy storage today is something which you can foresee by adding additional capacities with even smaller prices in the future, starting small. Definitely something which is changing the shape of the grid and changing also this need for real-time data and allowing a smoother and easier integration of distributed energy resources. So you have many different types of battery energy storage projects. You can think, like in some cases here, of a very large battery energy storage to stabilize the grid at a high voltage point that will, in a given area, allow to integrate more wind, solar, and very fast allow to smooth the power that is coming into the grid or do some power factor correction. And you can have smaller size battery energy storage that will solve the issue of intermittence at the point of generation. So that basically this decentralized generation is not seen by the grid, by the operator, as intermittent anymore. Once again, this has a cost, so it's only thanks now to the prices of batteries, PV, solar, and generation that this is becoming financially viable versus others more traditional technologies. And battery energy storage can be used in microgrids. And here I would just like to have a small word on how we in ABB define the difference between large energy, strong connected to the grid battery storage to microgrids. Microgrid for us has a unique capability to segregate from a portion of the network a small portion of the network. As you know, if you have a small area and you want to have a high penetration of solar or wind, which is with intermittent generation, you will face a big issue because you will not have inertia on the system. When you have those large gas turbines, coal-fired turbines, your network has a strong inertia. If one substation is lost, if one small power plant is lost, the system will readapt itself with the current controllers. If you're on a small grid, which is 20, 30 megawatt, and you have, let's say, 5, 6 megawatt of solar plus 2, 3 megawatts of wind, with the intermittence, you will have an unstable grid that cannot sustain itself. And microgrids, which is using decentralized controllers, has this ability with the controllers talking to each other to stabilize with, or actually without battery storage, with diesel gensets, for instance, which can react very quickly to setting points to stabilize this grid. And we have the technology and the experience of doing this for many customers. It sounds a very simple technology, but in fact, many companies fail during the implementation. I just wanted to mention this. Now, microgrids. It's same as smart grid, a little bit of a buzzword. What is really important if you think about microgrids is to understand what is the business driver for you. Why do you want to put in place a microgrid? Is it to give access to electricity to regions, areas which are very remote, in which maybe putting a diesel gensets and just PV would be too expensive and you need to stabilize the grids? Is it to maximize stability by putting battery storage so that you can allow with the batteries to stabilize and improve the reliability? In some cases, you may have a complex network and need to do maintenance on some generators, and you want to have a big UPS, uninterruptible power supply, and you can put, again, a microgrid with battery storage, or you want to increase the penetration of renewables into your grid, where microgrid brings a solution. But I really insist that each time that you have microgrid in mind, it is really important to bring a business case and to think of what is the reason for which this is put together, because it has a cost, and in the end, we see that investment, everything comes down to the money it costs. Sorry. So microgrids, coming back to this. On our side, we have developed, I will just show you a picture afterwards, a productized solution which is relatively unique in the sense that it includes in a box, which is a container, all the functions you may think of for a microgrid. So you may decide to put a microgrid first just to complement and stabilize your grids, and then want to add some more PV and so on. You will not need to redo and redesign entire your grid. With the solution that we have put together, you can actually set the inverters to different functions and upgrade it during the life of your project. And these are always relatively long-term investments, and you need to think not only of step one, but what you will want to do in 5, 10, 15 years, and ensure that you have technologies which will have upgradable compatibility, and not to do what you intended to do just for today. So this is just a view of the product we have developed in a box, let's say a container which is modular, so you can add more containers. All the functions that a microgrid can do that you can think of. It can stabilize, it can do STATCOM functions, it can of course do purely battery energy storage support for your network. And most important, you can just add modules one after the other, combine it with different sources of generation, and this is a key point because on our side we have controllers which are distributed. So you can add afterwards a controller for a diesel genset, or for a gas turbine, or for a hydro plant, or a PV solar that you did not have at the beginning, and just add it to the entire control system that you had at the beginning. And this is a big difference versus centralized control systems, where you may not have this upgradability capability because the design has been fixed from the beginning. I just want to share with you the latest, one of the latest reference we have developed. It's a little bit far away, but it's also in a nice country. I consider Thailand is very nice with all the nice locations to visit. This is at the other side of the world in an island called Aruba, where the utility had a big challenge wanting to put more renewables. It's about 130 megawatt network, and they are integrating more and more renewables into it because it's an area with high tourism. Costing for them to bring new power plants, whether it is coal or diesel, is just not acceptable in this environment. And they have decided to develop a large microgrid with generation assets which are set quite far from each other, and to allow the grid to be stable in different locations and to disconnect itself, but still self-healing and sustainable in different locations. So with this microgrid technology, we're able to integrate in different parts of the grid many different generation assets of different nature and still guarantee that the grid will be stable with a relatively, say, short return on investment compared to investing in conventional power plants. So I mentioned to you at the beginning that smart grid is a very deep subject. What I've been just mentioning to you is what I believe will be the strongest or what will happen most on the grid in terms of investment of heavy assets. Battery energy storage, microgrid, because it is changing the shape of the future. Now I would like to move to something which is very different, which is intangible, which is more data. And the smart grids, basically, of the future, beside this investment on, let's say, hardware, will come from this utilization of data that we can have in the grids. All of you, I'm sure, have a handphone today. If you compare the way you are working or managing data compared to 10 years ago, you all know how fast things are moving. And if you look at utilities, large, I put utilities, but this is applicable to power plants, IPPs, APPs, large industries which have a lot of electrical assets, there is quite a lot of challenges which are being faced today, applicable or not depending on which companies you are working for, but there is a common ground. First of all, a lot of investment in many grids were done 20, 30 years ago at the time of the industrial boom when people were getting connected to the electricity. And all the utilities almost are facing today a challenge, replace or extend the life of assets. And this can have big implications in terms of money. So everybody wants, of course, to keep their transformer, their GIS, their cables for as long as possible and invest into new technologies instead of investing into hardware. But how to do that? Second, everybody, consumers, myself, we want to have reliability. We don't want our electricity supply to be cut over the weekends, not to be able to watch TV, our kids to be able to do their work at home. And in many countries you have regulations. Operators are being fined quite heavily if they go beyond a certain point or below a certain point for reliability. Next, with the distributed energy, as I mentioned already, you have a need for more and more data control, which requires new technology. Safety, actually I will show you some of the technologies which allow some more safe operation of the grid for the operators or the people which put it in place. And last, OPEX and CAPEX constraints. I don't know any company today where budgets are big and where your boss is telling you just spend the money that you want. Most of the time the government for state-owned companies will come and tell you you have to reduce your budget or will have more and more scrutiny on what you are spending. And this is valid for private companies as well, where the board of directors, executive directors will want to have a look at the maintenance, OPEX, CAPEX spend, and ensure that these are optimized. And this requires data to be put together and assessment that the data is correct. So what is the grid of the future? I mentioned already renewables growth, intermittency, volatility, and the fact that this capacity of have on and off grid control is very important. And all of this is coming to the control of the assets that you have on your grids. That's one point. But where things are really moving today is the technologies which are allowing the management, and this is at operation maintenance level, to see what is happening on the field through digitization and then the digitalization. I will come back to the difference between the two at a later stage. So you have all these asset-related investments, which will ever always be needed. And the next step of a smarter grid is how you use the data that you can get from these assets, clearly. So this is trying a kind of time frame diagram which is trying to explain what happened over the past 20 years and what we foresee will happen depending on the countries in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So the grid started, about 30, 40 years ago. Companies came with SCADA, which was allowing the management of grids on a very larger scale, and ability to go down in the level of management. It started with transmission management system, EMS, energy management system. Then companies like us came with distributed management system, where you could basically control from a command control center millions, sometimes 10 million of customers, and automate the management of distribution assets. This is relatively mature now. I say relatively because there are still some challenges and developments related to the integration of distributed energy resources, which have no simple questions, but this is really well advanced. What you're seeing now is you are getting, in many cases, more and more data from the field. Actually, your operators, your maintenance crew are already collecting a lot of data. The problem is this data is always on paper. It is usually finishing in a shelf in an office, and you will pull this data when there is a problem. When a transformer fails, or when you want to do investment, and people need to scramble through a lot of data. What current technologies allow you to do is to use this data. Use this data to do analysis on what is your asset base, also to do predictive maintenance, and I will show you go beyond this point to do prescriptive maintenance. And what is fantastic today with this big data concept, this data is not used only for operation and maintenance on the field, but can be used after at management level to optimize the way you do your investments and to do prioritization, ensuring still that you have a safe, reliable grid that will not fail. And last, these technologies allow you to manage your workforce, people on the ground, with also, again, personal tablets or whatever, and to connect all this data and close the loop in a very seamless manner. This is a concept of connected asset lifecycle management. And even looking forward, you can even think of looking at what is happening on the market and put this data into your investment plan to build different scenarios. I was mentioning at the beginning that there is a shift and there are some risks or threats for many business models. Prosumers are a threat because they may take off revenues from some utilities. And many utilities need to invest into new business models in order to survive over the long term, generate new business models. And there is a lot of things we are convinced that will happen in the electrical fields, in utilities or in heavy industry. This is just a curve showing for the different sectors. I'm sorry if some cannot be seen very well, of what has been happening in digitalization over the past 10 or 20 years. Of course, ICT, information communication technology, was the first to go in this direction by nature. These are all the information system companies, the IBMs, the people putting data centers, telecommunication companies. Then you have the media. All of us know Facebook and so on since many years, and they are very much ahead in the use of data. If you look at more conventional or traditional types of industries, automotive, chemicals, oil and gas, and closer to us, utilities, we are really just at the beginning of this transformation that will happen, depending on the countries, of course. And now we see in many countries, this is giving really a competitive edge, when you have competition between different actors on the market, because it allows the optimization and more productivity from one company to another. So first, a word on digitalization and how it applies to real assets. First and foremost, utilities, but also heavy industries. It allows you to bring visibility on what's happening on the ground in your assets directly. You all heard about all those sensors that you can put in transformers, you can put it on a GIS, you can actually now put it on cables, you can put sensors everywhere. And what is interesting is that now you can have a common communication protocol and a common language between those sensors, the station level, and bring this common language to the control centers, which was not the case before. And without having companies like us having proprietary languages, now there is this IEC 61850 standard, which is commonly used across the industry, and which allows to ensure you that what you're doing with one company can be used on platforms from another one. And what is really interesting for this is that you are able to pull the data from the ground and aggregate it at the enterprise level, step by step. So these are large investments, because sensors in the field, this is usually spread in very, very wide and fragmented areas, very fragmented data. But once again, the standardization of the protocols and way to manage this data is making it possible to them to go to the concept of big data and analysis. So digital substation, as I will show you afterwards, we basically segregate this digitalization into the different levels that you have on a grid. The field, so this is substation level, really at the level of the equipment, then going to the control room when you aggregate still real-time data, to the operations center, which is more the asset management, operations, which has a different time scale on how things are looked at, and to the boardroom, where people are deciding where money is being spent, which is a very important factor. So on the field, I don't know the background of all of yours, but I'm sure that you heard of digital substation. There are some nice pilot projects which are ongoing in Thailand, and this is definitely a way that will develop in the future. Why is that? Because the technology may be a little more expensive on the substation automation side, but this is what really enables you to bring the data from the equipment to the station level and then to the control rooms. It is a technology that allows you to save on the footprint, because you don't have to use these conventional instrument transformers that take place, and having digital end-to-end allows you also to have a safer operation on your grid. You don't have copper cables with risk of people getting electrocuted on the field. Everything can be pre-tested and installed in much shorter time than what it was previously. In addition, with the digital technology, if your network is changing, you don't need to do, knee point calculation on CTVTs. I know that engineers love to do that in the past, but now with digital technology, it's just a matter of doing different settings on the computer. So your system is also future-proof and avoids you to reinvest into new instrument transformers in 10 years if the area or if the network characteristics have changed in an area. So this is just an example of what you can do with transformers, for instance, with these sensors and digital it doesn't need to be a digital substation. You can bring just the data from transformers with the sensors, transform it into IEC 61850, and you could pull it into a control center which is looking at all these assets. But basically you can monitor everything that is happening in a transformer. You can monitor this locally, but what is beautiful today, you can have your specialists on transformers which are located in the headquarters who can monitor your transformers from far away. And this point is really important, I think, because you can't develop transformer specialist experts in each and every substation, or sometimes even in each and every region. Knowing a transformer, knowing how it behaves, is something that takes years, and I don't think you find nowadays people who have a passion for transformers so much on the field. So you better have, and many companies do that, really competency centers, asset per asset, and having all this data centrally and able to build a really philosophy on how assets are maintained, analyzed, and to help the management make decisions. And this is possible through digitalization and bringing the data somewhere. Digital substation, so basically this is applicable from high to low voltage. You have now technologies which allow sensors even in the medium, I don't think yet low voltage, but this is probably going to come in terms of sensors. And all the standards, once again, are common. One key point into all this is to have a common language. And the standard is really mature since 5 or 6 years. It is evolving, but it is very important. This is upgradable and with backwards compatibility standard. The way it has been designed is future-proof. So you can really be ensured that in 10 years' time there is not a new communication and way of data modeling which will be coming on the market. The way people have started to design this from its very inception is to make it future-proof. And I believe this is very important because if you have been in the market for 30 years, you have been seeing so many evolutions and having to invest in so many different automation, substation technologies that it was a little bit, I think, tiring, except for companies like us who were selling more. But this future-proof and this focus on the data itself is really a crucial point. And again, now you can go from the process very deep down the line on the equipment itself to the network level and aggregate all this data in a seamless manner. So what is happening now on the control room in terms of, let's say, smart grid and evolution of the grid? In many countries, you have higher penalties if customers do not have the right access to electricity. I'm not sure I don't think it's applicable in Thailand here, but I can tell you in many countries around the region, this is already the case. If the operators do not meet a certain SAIDI, they will get penalties from the regulator. You see that there is more and more demand for reducing peak demands and energy losses on the distribution feeders. And this can only be done through the optimization of how you manage the distribution network. As I mentioned also, investment had been done quite a few years back, and now the technologies which are running those control systems are a little bit outdated, and there is an interest in refreshing to allow integration of intermittent sources and managing deeper into the grid the distribution challenges that people are facing. What has changed over the past years is the control systems are now able to integrate the many different aspects of what is needed for a utility or a large consumer in order to have visibility and manage its grids. So of course you have the integration to geographical information systems, and this is crucial if you want to do also mobile workforce management and do the asset management connected to your SCADA. Customer information system, and I will come back to this afterwards. It is crucial in our view to connect your SCADA system to the OMS, outage management system. This is a trend we see in many countries to have one integrated and single system and not to separate it, so that you can have seamless transfer of information from one to the other without having separated interfaces. What is really crucial also is you're getting more and more data from behind the meter on your consumers. Honestly, today, most of the companies don't know what to do with this data too well, how to monetize it, or what will happen in the future. But there are so many ideas and concepts, notably the fact that people will become consumers, that everybody is convinced that this data will have a value in the future and can be monetized. So it's important that your system can also aggregate and pull this data. MWM Mobile Workforce Management, I will come back to this later. And then you have all the other functions for trouble call management and so on. In the end, so that your system, which is integrated, allows you to do analytics, to have dashboards, and to turn back on how your system is performing and can be improved. Oops. So I just put a slide together because we often see customers, because these are sometimes siloed in the organization, separating their SCADA system, distribution management system, from OMS and DMS functions, outage management system and distribution management system functions. If you separate the two, you have to run two different models of your network, which poses some issues very often of data quality, compatibility, and of having the same data. If you have two separate systems, if there is any change on the network, for instance, maintenance and so on, it is extremely difficult to keep the data consistent. You need to have investment in two systems in terms of IT, because they will not run on the same servers, so you double your investment. You cannot use the same user interfaces. You need to have separate HMIs for each of them. And the most important is the last one, situational awareness. If you are having some emergency, for instance a flood, and you need really the operations to be working very, very closely with the maintenance and crews on the field, having two different systems will pose its own challenges in terms of how you can restore the power very fast. And we have seen, in many countries, people really insisting on having the two systems combined so as to be able to benefit from big data and common data pool. So I've been talking now of substation, digital substation, control centers, and there is something which is sometimes overlooked. It is telecommunications, which is what is happening in between, and how important that is for companies, especially in the frame today of everything that's happening with hacking and cybersecurity. I'll just have a word to you about this. We, as ABB, are investing quite heavily in this field of telecommunications. We acquired a company, or the mission-critical part of a company called KEYMILE at the end of last year. It's a company which has an edge on telecommunications, wired communication through fiber optic. And why have we done that? Well, telecommunication, you may all know, is a very, very competitive market, with suppliers from China, Taiwan, with very, very low prices. This is because we believe that telecommunication is very often overlooked. And we see in Europe companies working with us because of the concept or the fears of cybersecurity, and as digitalization is coming, this is something that each company needs to have in mind. So when you're going to operations, you're running mission-critical systems, and you need to be able to segregate the data that you are using. You want to pull data from CCTV, you want to pull data from teleprotection, real-time data that is time-critical if you want to do some operation from your control system, and you need to have a technology which is not based on broadband IT, even though the bandwidth is very wide, but a technology which is able to layer with the right level of security and time tagging and time response for each portions of the network. And this is what we have invested in. Last point, if you look at broadband telecommunication companies, they will usually put end of life to the system, the products that they provide after 5 or 10 years. And then what happens to our customers? They have to replace their entire telecom systems after a while. We have a few examples in the region now. You can come to me and I can give you disclose those examples. It's going to be public. They have to spend $5 or $10 million just to replace the network after having invested into it 7 or 8 years ago. And what is happening today in the field of telecommunication? I'm not sure you are aware about this, but for $450 or euro, That's about the same. You, me, can go on internet and buy this device which is called a coupler and which allows you, without being seen, it is impossible to be seen because this is just listening, to tap onto a fiber optic and to listen to all the traffic. And with the technologies you have today, the hackers, by listening to the traffic, there is some easy machine learning today. With some open source software, you are able basically to pull all the data that is going through a network. And there is nothing you can do about this. A company can go into a utilities, an airport, listen to the traffic, some even with a SLA protection encryption for passwords. After a certain while, people logging in after a few times are able to crack and to find ways to enter into a system. And when you look at the behavior of how an IT system is working, this is how hackers find entry points. And why we invested in this company, Keymail, is because we have, through them, a unique encryption technology which will encrypt the communication from one end to another using quantum technology. This sounds a little bit scary. I don't know how many of you are going to particle physics and knowing the quantum technology. This is based on pure random concepts. At the level of the atoms, you have quantum mechanics, where basically it is pure probabilistic. And this technology allows us to completely encrypt with definitely undecipherable network streams, which will be with keys which are refreshed all the time. And this is one of the key reasons why we invested into this. And last, there is another enabling technology also, which we acquired some more years back, which is on wireless technology. So on the field, you need to pull the data from a lot of RTUs, disconnectors, whatever which is on the distribution network in very remote areas. And most of the customers are today going through public network, because public network is easily available. You can make a contract for 5, 10 years, buying just very cheap SIM cards. The technology is relatively cheap, but you can't get a guarantee of service usually, because this is public network. You get disruptions, and in the end you have to pay the bill for the public network over the life of the telecommunication network that you have put together. We on our side invested in a private network technology, which is called, it is based on the concept of mesh network. So the routers that we installed on the equipment are able to reconnect to each other if any of them fails or a node is not available. And this has no operational costs. You don't need to go through a public network. You don't need to pay a monthly bill. And this is mission critical, which means that the traffic is being guaranteed in terms of the speed at which it will reach your control center. And you can use this also to put CCTV information, to put all kinds of data that you will require in the frame of your IoT investment. And it is again future fail-proof because it is developed on very standard technologies. And we believe that this is a technology also that will catch the interest of more and more customers as you will need to put more and more data from the fields to the operation centers, and you will not want to pay higher and higher bandwidth bill with the telecom operators. Next, so this is all what I have been mentioning is really a real-time operation and related to the operation of your grid. As I mentioned to you, what will make really the big difference between the different companies in terms of a smarter grid is how the grid is managed with all this data. Having the data is very nice. Now, what do you do with all this data? And what is really something developing is how you manage the assets. So, of course, you have today asset registers. This is very standard, so this is the registration of all your assets, that you have one transformer here of type X that has been in operation since whatever years, so on, so characteristics, so you have a register. What do you do with this? You need to use now this data and combine it with the data which is coming from the field. And on our side, we have developed a platform which is connecting this data register, which is more a finance perspective, with the data on the fields, and which is really designed for utilities, which is basically having intelligence on each asset and how it is being managed. So this is what we call it connected asset lifecycle management. You have your register, you have the data which is linked to the equipment, how it is behaving on the field, and then you can use this data to make decisions and to see the status of the asset. And the next step, which is already a technology we have developed, is how you manage your own workforce, your crew, to go and maintain this asset, and all of this in a loop and in an integrated system that can be used throughout the organization and break the silos. So trying to put this on a picture, because all of this is very conceptual. It's very difficult to represent information systems on pictures. So I try to put this on another slide. So you have all this data which is coming from the fields, digital substation or not. You can also take data which is coming from paperwork and insert it into the asset management platform. So it can be real-time data or manually entered data. And all this is being aggregated into a unified and central platform which will be used to make decisions on the maintenance. It is taking data from very different sources. You can have data which is coming from people if you apply mobile workforce management from their tablets directly, or you can have the crew which is doing inspections still fill it on paper, coming back to the office and feeding it into the system. You can have the data which is coming from real data sensors. Any kind of sources can be used and integrated into this. And what is most interesting is this data will have to be used by expert systems, and we have either own data modeling, or we can use your health index, your models, or machine learning to make decisions on what needs to be done with these assets, and look at this across the entire organization. And I will talk a little bit more about this. This is what we call asset performance management. I'm sure you have heard about it. And what is fantastic over the past few years, the number of assets which have been integrated into this and for which models are now existing is extending, maybe not day after day, but month after month, with more and more reliability on the ability to predict and sometimes prescript what to do with those assets. So we have now models for transformers, breakers, capacitor banks, for cables, all these assets which are named here. And we are developing more in the future. Now we have for medium voltage switchgear, and this will be continuing. And once again, we can also integrate models from other sources and which have been developed by customers. And what is interesting is that these models here can be used to do prescriptive maintenance. You may have seen some similar slide in the past. In terms of analytics on assets, you can have descriptive maintenance. So the system will just tell you this asset needs to have, this done just based on the operation manual, maintenance manuals from the supplier. What is more important is that you're able to do a diagnostic based on the data, and the step which most of the companies are able to do today is predictive. So you see that the oil analysis is going into a certain way, or that the circuit breaker, the contact resistance is evolving in a certain way, and you can predict that in 6 months, 1 year, you will need to replace the oil, do a major overhaul of your assets. But what is most important for many assets, we have now developed prescriptive maintenance. So our system are able to tell the maintenance crew or to make suggestions, because as I mentioned today, machine cannot replace the humans, can make suggestions on what are the maintenance and what is the procedure to be followed. So the system is now working with the humans, and this is, I think, how artificial intelligence will really make a difference, to work together to make the best decision for the company and help in the decision making. I don't think any company should rely fully on data and analytics that are coming out of one of these things to make decision, but it should help and still leave the last decision for humans who have the sense and ability to judge. So again, it's difficult to show on slides what a system can do, but this is just an example of a company which is basically not really real data, but just an example of how it could look like, of a fleet of transformers. So as you can guess, what is in red is the assets that require some quick assessment or actions. You can click on each of the assets and understand what needs to be done, whether it is a maintenance action or a replacement. And then the management and the crew can decide what are the priorities in what needs to be done. And you are not anymore relying on just information that is coming from experts on the ground that may not have heard the noise that is coming from a transformer, or who may have done an inspection too fast and overlooked, just put the file in a shelf, but really on data, on monitoring how the assets are performing. What is also, this system will be able to tell you that you have purchased, I take an example, 100 transformers of ABB in 1992, and you will be able to see that these transformers coming from the same series maybe are hopefully behaving very well if you compare them to 20 transformers you could purchase from company X in 1993, where you have, I don't know, bushing failures already on 5 of the assets, and then you can decide to have a replacement program of the bushings of this kind of transformers. So this data can allow you also to make statistics based on family of assets, and you can really drill down to any components within these assets. And this is a strong point of the system we have developed, because these are developed for companies like you, the utilities, the heavy industries, and not financial system. If you look at most of the asset management system on the fields, you have some very famous IT companies, I can't name them. They are doing IT systems, asset management for supermarkets, for banks, for, you name it, automobile industry, but they will treat an asset as an asset. They do not have the capability to make the difference between a transformer or a fridge in a supermarket. We have developed systems which are for you, for the energy-intensive industry. And the way the assets are structured and modeled are made so that you can decompose each of the assets into its components. So coming back to a transformer, you can know that a transformer has a bushing, has a winding, has a oil tank, and from this, do the statistics over the lifetime of the asset really specific to the electrical industry. And this is something which is really unique. Another thing we can manage is linear assets, those transmission lines, cables, which are not just one asset. These are assets which go along a certain distance, and our systems allow you to see that you have joints, terminations, that you have suspenders, insulators, and to manage the asset to this level as well, not just as one transmission line. We have, this is not such a new technology for us, but the effort we have done in the recent years is to integrate it between the enterprise asset performance, and mobile workforce management. And we have some customers who are working with us since quite a long time and helping us to develop the models also for their assets. One of the references we like to mention is this large company in the US, AEP, which is having a large base of transformers, circuit breakers, and which basically has been facing critical failures on transformers. They decided to work with us because the cost of a failure was around $20 million, and using our systems, they were able to help all their experts to identify where the problems were and to do this predictive and prescriptive maintenance. Right, I'm short, I have to speed up. Okay, and utilizing this data, as I mentioned to you, we are not investing in technology just for the pleasure of it, is because this allows companies to be more efficient and to have a less stressful life, to have more productivity, and to invest in what is right, and mitigate catastrophic incidents which may have dire consequences for the operators or the public around. With all this data, what is fantastic is that you can use it to do what we call asset investment planning. So you know what you have on your network, you know the lifetime of the assets, what needs to be invested in terms of replacement and maintenance, and you can prioritize and phase with your maintenance crew what needs to be done. And we see in many countries this requirement to put ISO 55000 compliance, notably because of the regulator or the state or the shareholders want to make sure that the money is spent in the right direction. And with this data, you're able to basically justify any investment seamlessly because everything is based on data which is coming from the field. And last, as I mentioned to you, to close the loop, once you have all this data, asset data, predictive data, you have a maintenance program to perform, and we are able to link this data with the schedule of the crews to send them on the field, even using their personal devices. They will receive instructions from the people who are managing the crews to go to this location. All the procedures will be on their phone, and you can ensure then that you have across the entire organization standard operating procedures which are followed, and that data is not lost. They're able to capture directly on the field what is being done. We have some customers who had serious concerns because people were saying inspections were made, but in the end, inspections were not done, and this led to critical failures. Here you can take pictures, the inspector has to put the picture in the field, and this is being all recorded. You can do geofencing, meaning that the data will be available only to the operator when he reaches next to the site of the assets. This is for cybersecurity and to ensure data doesn't go everywhere, and yeah, so many things. So to conclude on that, this is really closing the loop and how data is being used and how we believe that the grid will become smarter is the use of this data. So you have all these real-time changes on how the grid is managed, enabling really the integration of distributed energy resources, managing prosumers, keeping a grid stable, battery energy storage. But where the big money is going to come from is how you monetize all the data that you can have on your grid and invest in, I don't know if we call it big data, but digitalization of the management of your grid to be able to manage end-to-end the processes and not in a silo organization in your organizations. And last, once you have all this data, to go to the boardroom, there are also a way today to connect all this to what's happening out there on the market. Fuel prices are changing all the time. There are some predictions of what will be happening in the future. And you are working with consultants to foresee, have some market intelligence in the future. And most of the companies need to do basically forecasting of what will be the best investment for the future to sustain business model. And we have developed, since quite a number of years, very specific technologies and platforms to enable our customers also to make the right decision at this level, which is really the boardroom level of where investments should be done. So as a conclusion, my last words is for a smarter grid. It's really about moving from the operational technology, which is, I think, relatively mature today because the IEC 61850 standards were developed since a long time. It is proven, there has been many pilot projects, and this is really happening. The control room, there's still a few things to be developed in terms of the integration of renewables into very large asset base, but this is really happening and in the roadmaps of all companies. And the big shift is really how data can be monetized and used across the organizations to have a smarter management of the grid, and not only a smarter grid, and that with technology and us humans we can manage this more efficiently. Yeah, that is all for my side, and I hope it was interesting for you. Thank you very much.
ไม่ทราบมีคำถามอะไรอยากสอบถามเพิ่มเติมไหมครับ
ขอถามเป็นภาษาอังกฤษแล้วกันนะฮะครับ regarding to your talks you said about the prescriptive maintenance or prescriptive the question is in my understood that I do think that you use the machine learning or sometimes some algorithm that works similarly to neural network or something like the fuzzy logics. The question is how long that you need for the training in case of you can make the machine prescriptable.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. So first of all, I would like just to clarify we can't today ourselves, to be honest, do prescriptive maintenance on everything. And there is no solution in the machines for that. We are doing this on specific assets where we have, let's say, very good experience and develop the models like transformers, circuit breaker, GIS, and having the expertise in-house, have developed with our maintenance service crews over 15-20 years of pulling system experts together, this prescriptive maintenance service. These will give to the maintenance crew and the operators a guideline, suggestions. It will never replace the expertise and on the field the need to have people who know transformers. You will never, I believe, be able to send somebody who doesn't know much about transformers on the field to do a maintenance, and you will always need a human expert to see what are the recommendations that are made by the system. But to implement such a system and to get the prescriptive maintenance recommendation from the system is very easy because the models are already existing. As you know, a transformer, unless you go to very specific ones, is a transformer. Technology has not evolved so much over the past 50 years. There have been, of course, optimization of how the windings are done. There are different kinds of transformers. But this is electromagnetic and mechanical constraints which nobody can change. So the prescriptive models that we have developed are solid and can be deployed extremely easily. It all depends also on the data which is available for each of the assets. If you are only having a certain, very limited data, the prescription that you may get and the prediction that you may get will be relatively limited, of course. But if you are implementing oil analysis, again, we are online, or manual and diluted into the system, you can really get very clear prescription over even a long period of time with foreseeing what needs to be done over the next 3, 6 months or 1 year. Did I answer your question? So the systems themselves are very user-friendly.
Okay.
Does
you mean that you don't need a time for training the system?
Now, if you're talking of machine learning,
yes.
Machine learning is something really interesting. A lot of people talk about it, and we are, partnering with some companies like Microsoft, IBM, Watson. We don't develop our own machine learning systems. I'd like to clarify something for all of your attention. Machine learning is efficient only if you have failures. There is no machine learning system that learns from a system that doesn't fail. It is through failure or through input of an expert that something needs to be done that machine learning can be handled.
Okay.
So
thank you very much. I clear that your software is not based on the machine learning.
And we are able to use machine learning, but don't dream that machine learning will just take the data and by itself be able to come with predictive models. To predict, the machine needs to see failures. And from the failures, it will learn what were the criteria that leads to this failure. And it's not one failure. It will need a few failures to be able to identify what are the common points and to learn. It's like when you learn how to walk as a baby. I'm not sure my example is very good, but somebody who doesn't fall will not learn that he should not step forward, just like me with the microphone now. And you need to have incidents for the machine to learn, no escape. So if any company tells you that we implement machine learning and you can just use our models, I invite you to be looking a little bit more in details that this machine learning really applies. It also comes to data privacy. We will not share the data if we do a system on the cloud. And I hope I'm not losing all of you. If we do a system on the cloud and you entrust us with your data to do machine learning and to have the systems run with your data in our premises, we are not going to use your data for other customers. So whatever will be used as machine learning on your data will be just for your benefit.
Okay, thank you so much. I have my second question. You talk about it in the future. It's quite obvious that we come to be the digital utility in the future. My question is how we build the staff competency, because our staff in general we know about the power utility, but in the future we need the digital competency. How do you advise us?
So that's a very, very long question. All the companies, and you can read a lot of management articles. If you want to have a digital transformation, you need to embark on a relatively long journey. It is indeed going across all the processes in the organization, and you need to have a plan which is very clear on where to start and how you migrate to the typical and usual way of managing things out of Excel, different systems, and to review your procedures end to end. It is not something that happens in a day. And we have seen companies fail into their digital transformation journey because of oversimplifying this basically need for having an end-to-end review of the processes. There is a simple way to start, is to start relative, I wouldn't say small, but with a very specific area of the operations of your company, and then to extend it step by step. What you need to make sure if you go in this is that the future of the systems you want to integrate will be easily connected to the system you will select for this portion of the business. And this is one of the big challenges, interfacing the different IT systems one to another. As far as training of the people is concerned, it depends on the generation gaps and the generations that you have in your companies. If you have relatively, I would say, young people, I don't consider myself young, they find all of this very natural. For me, sometimes, even in my company, going to the IT systems and logging a ticket and so on is not so natural, and it takes time for people to get used to it. And what is very important is that people see an advantage into putting this into place, that it makes their life easier, and that it basically allows them to do their job better, faster, and maybe sometimes in a more agreeable manner. If you look at the operations crew today, for instance, who have to get the data from somewhere, put it from a file, they don't know if it is updated, then go on the field, it's hot, they have to write things on paper and then go back and write it again. On the field, I believe that really using personal devices with the right technology will make the life so much easier. People can receive from their home without going to the office the instructions, what they need to do, all the data, take the pictures, finish their work on the field. The headquarter or the maintenance system will receive all the data finished and they will save many hours. You can optimize also their travel time. They don't have to go one day to a substation 50 kilometers in one direction, the next day and 20 kilometers away, and pull different crews. And all of this is possible in terms of optimization of fleet, of management crews. So people will see their own benefits, and if it is the case, really embrace these changes. Did I answer at least a part of your question?
Yes, thank you so much in your advice.
มีท่านไหนสอบถามเพิ่มเติมไหมครับ ขอบคุณมากครับ
So if no more questions, I thank you very much for your attention because I know my presentation was very conceptual at times. And after lunch, it's probably not the easiest to follow, but I still hope that you got something out of it. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much for the detail of knowing the session of Smart Grid experience.